This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Jimmy Cannon. He is a voice and public speaking coach who helps business leaders, entrepreneurs, and teams communicate with confidence, clarity, and presence. His signature Cannon method is built on three core pillars: voice, developing projection, articulation, and resonance to speak with authority; confidence, overcoming anxiety and speaking with self-assurance; and presence, commanding the room through engaging body language and energy. With a background as a singer and a saxophonist, performing alongside icons like Sir Tom Jones and Roger Taylor from Queen, he brings performance techniques into the corporate world, helping professionals optimize their voice for high-stakes meetings, presentations, and leadership moments. So, Jimmy, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Absolute pleasure, Steve. I hate listening to bios. Isn't it terrible listening to? I don't think I even wrote that. Somebody else wrote that. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, really? It's just, I suppose you have to write these things, don't you, to give some kind of credibility.
Yeah. Well, you gotta know who we're talking to at least a little bit, but we'll get a lot
Absolutely.
more into it in the program.
Yeah,
So
for sure, for sure.
let's just start with a little context.
Mm,
In the bio it mentioned that you're a musician as well, and
mm,
so just
mm.
tell us a little bit about you just kind of your journey. Where you grew up. A little bit about you being a musician and now in the corporate world. So just give us a short summary of your
Yeah.
journey and where you're at.
Okay, so I was brought up in a place called Cornwall. It's very like a very sort of fishing village. There's a place called Mevagissey, which is a very harbour village, really, really beautiful place. And I was pretty much a small fish in a big fish in a small. How do you hang on? It's late in the evening. Sort of a big fish in a small pond, and I moved to London to make it as a musician. So I played saxophone at the time, and I still play sax. And I was self-taught. I moved to London in a band. We tried to make it, we didn't make it. The whole sort of rock and roll sort of story, really.
Yeah.
And I moved back to do some teaching, and then lots of water under the bridge. Then I moved back to London again. I then decided, right, I need to take this more seriously. So I did a postgraduate at Trinity College of Music. I studied jazz. I studied jazz composition. I then became a singer at the ripe old age of 28. I
Yeah.
decided that I wanted to be the next Frank Sinatra. So I studied singing, I had singing lessons. A friend of mine said to me, Jimmy, you're straining. You're doing 8 shows a week. You're straining. You need to get some singing lessons. So I got some singing lessons very luckily, off a chap who is in the English National Opera, and he's a caricature tenor, and Colin, and I had some lessons off him, and I ended up doing lots of teaching as well as performing over the years. Traveled the world with various different bands, playing saxophone and backing vocals, and my own band singing jazz and etc. etc. And luckily to play with some great musicians, not just famous ones, but very talented musicians as well, and met lots of amazing people on the way. And I I decided that I wanted to. I've always been interested in the voice and the tonality of the voice and the and accent, etc., and where people come from, with the heritage and the connection culturally to the voice and what that represents when we're speaking. And from being from London, I was actually born in London. I was born in Wimbledon, and there's sort of there's a lot of regional accents in the UK, and you would argue that perhaps my accent was called estuary accent. So it
Okay.
used to be RP, received pronunciation, in the BBC, but there's also a sort of an estuary or South London sort of accent, right? It's not too Cockney, but it's nearly there. So it's very English, but it's a little bit cockney. Anyway, we could go. I'm always been fascinated. And I was having a conversation probably 10 years ago, maybe 12, with a chap at a party. It was a Eurovision party. I had co-written a song for Eurovision a long time ago now. And I was having a chat with a gentleman who's in the advertising world, and he said, "Hey, look, we need to do weekly presentations, and we've got no training. I hate doing it. I hate speaking in public." And I thought this is interesting. And I was at the time doing a master's in voice pedagogy because I was doing a lot of teaching, and I decided that I needed to know more about the voice if I could teach it properly rather than just kind of wing it. And I discovered that there was a big thing about performance anxiety and public speaking anxiety, and it's all under the umbrella of social anxiety. So, what my mentor at the time, Debbie, said to me, "Jimmy, why don't you go down that road and you can study performance anxiety as part of your MA, and if you want to, we can continue that." So, I ended up studying acceptance and commitment therapy alongside the MA, and that has been really the basis and the cornerstone of my coaching, alongside also. I'm really kind of paraphrasing here and putting everything to a very short intro. I'm sorry if this is going on too long.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So alongside leadership coaching, so I also have in the UK it's called an L7 leadership coaching qualification, which was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
So the three-prong attack, I suppose, really is coaching, acceptance, commitment therapy, which I'm more than happy to talk about, and voice coaching. So what was happening was that I was slowly transitioning my singing teaching or my vocal teaching into speaking. So people were coming to me with somatic problems or physiological responses to anxiety. So they were and they still do. So a lot of people come to me with, they have a weak voice, or they're just avoiding talking, or
Mm.
there's, physiological or biological responses to the anxiety, but they're not aware necessarily of the anxiety. All they're aware of is the physical manifestations of that anxiety, which is short breaths, sweaty palms, shaky breath, long, short phrases, rushing, mumbling speech, etc. So that's what I decided that I needed to know a lot more about that, and about the symptoms and how to work with that. So that's what I do. That's what I do now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think we've talked a lot on this program about how often, we start our careers and we get into companies and businesses, and then you know, we learn what we do at that level, but then all of a sudden we're put in leadership positions. And a lot of times the leadership training doesn't start until you're already in the leadership position. And then even more so, the reason I'm so intrigued by this topic is because, we don't get people don't get speaking coaching or speaking
Mm-hmm.
training, Obviously, if you're a musician, you might, but as far as a leader in a corporate world or company, you just don't have that. And so, and we all know we've seen some amazing ones, some great ones that are just like, oh my gosh, they just inspire and move people and do great things. And then we see other ones that are really smart and run great companies, and then they speak, and you kind of think, oh, geez, it's not quite
Yeah, yeah,
what I expected, right?
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, it's really
yeah.
intriguing to me, and then I think it's really interesting too that not only do you work with the voice and how to give speeches and presentations and whatever, but you also work in that anxiety management as well because again, I'll just share a personal story. I was up for identified as taking on a national office in an association nationwide in the U.S. And the nominating committee came and asked me, and I turned it down twice because I couldn't see myself standing on a stage in front of 1,500 people, conducting the annual conference and whatever. I just couldn't get over that, and eventually I did, and took that position and was elected and was able to do it. But that was a barrier for me. That was kind of like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, I don't know if I can do that. So
yeah,
I wish I would have known that there were speaking coaches at the time because I could have used one. But
yeah.
anyway, it's just real intriguing to me. So it's
Mm-hmm.
great to have you on and hear about things that you're doing.
Absolute pleasure. And it's very, very typical, very, very common. I'm amazed how many people come to me. I mean, one of the first things that I found out, you know, during my sort of research was that public speaking is the third biggest fear in America.
Yeah.
It's 72%. I think at the last count.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
don't know
that's
how they
good.
counted that, but
Yeah.
yeah, just below death and snakes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And the
Well,
irony is that I actually have a phobia about snakes as well, and I'm not too keen on death, actually.
yeah, actually, I can understand. Well, and I think it's interesting too that the musician side of this, I think, is really intriguing to me. Are you familiar with a book called Yes to the Mess?
No, no, no.
It's
Tell me
written
about
by
that.
a
Yeah.
guy by the name of Frank Barrett, and it's one of my
Mm,
favorite leadership books. It's not
mm,
really well known, but he's a jazz pianist.
mm,
And so he says, yes to the mess. Kind of his theory is that, it's always going to be messy. It's always going to be complicated. Don't try
mm,
and make it, perfect because it's never going to be. So just say
mm,
yes to the mess, but just know how to manage it. And then he compares that to a jazz band.
mm,
When different performers go on the solo, and then the rest of the team has to kick in and follow him
mm,
and make it
mm,
sound great,
mm.
and sometimes it works great and they get in the groove and it's magical, and sometimes they're kind of jumping around trying to find out where's this guy going, so anyway,
It's
as
no, sorry to interrupt. No, I mean, I'm really keen on that metaphor for me actually, because as a jazz musician myself, it's something that I've been thinking. If I can link what I do as a singer and a jazz, so, I mean, I didn't probably didn't tell you, but I'm a jazz singer, so I
yeah,
specialize
yeah,
in jazz. And for me, I'll give an example actually. One of I have a client, and we were talking about, I don't know how we got into the subject. We were talking about scat singing, and I said normally most people don't want you to scat sing. Most musicians, especially particularly in the UK. I don't know about the States, but they don't really want singers to scat. It's like, oh God, off he goes again. He's going to scat. You know.
yeah,
And but actually, what we were talking about, which I thought was really interesting, is something that is a very recent thing for me, which I'm really excited about, sort of getting involved in and doing more research on, is that when you scat as a speaker, as a communicator, there's no pressure, there's no judgment, because you can't possibly judge as a speaker, so actually what I try to do with my clients is, I know this is a bit kind of way out, but rather than speaking the words, the idea is that maybe you hum them, or you intone them, or you what's called NG, so you're not actually creating the sound, you're not forming the words, you're not forming the vowel placements, so you're practicing something which is just a sort of a it's more of a muscular memory, more than anything else. And that's really interesting, that because most people, it's really about the judgment, either the self-judgment or other people's judgment, or other people's perception of what they of the speech and how you're coming across, that people are
yeah.
bothered about. So if you can get rid of that judgment, then you're free.
Yeah, that I think that's interesting. And so you take someone who's not a professional musician who's going to be up on the stage every night, but you have somebody in the business world. So how do you help
Mm,
them get through that? I mean, it's
mm,
like, okay, now, I'm good at what I do. I'm smart. I understand the information really well,
mm,
but uh, we know, and that how is that projected and how
mm,
that's communicated to the team is so vitally important.
mm.
And I think I wrote down here that, sometimes it's more of how you say it as opposed to what you say it. So how
Yeah.
do you teach that, and how do you get people
Mm.
to loosen up on that fear of speaking in front of others and being judged?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Well, it's the holistic approach. If we just focus on the voice for a moment, the important thing is, to most people rush their speech. Most people are not taking time to think about what they're going to say. So using the pause, using your breath to pause, is really, really key. And that's something that I talk about a lot, is controlling the phrasing, the length of phrasing, the amount of breath that you're using for each phrase, the time that you spend before you speak and in between the sentences and the phrasing, maybe taking time to pause to anticipate a certain point. It might be something about data, it might be a really interesting point. So there's a technique off the top of my head called sprints and drags, which I've nicked from a good friend of mine who's actually a world competition toastmaster
Yeah.
chap.
Yeah.
And I'll think of his name in a minute and give it to you. Bob Ferguson, there we go. Thank you, Bob. Bob Ferguson. And so his thing is, and he helps politicians, speak and really with flow. And ironically, with the way I'm speaking at the moment, it's been a long day. So, so sprints and drags is where you speed up for the sort of peripheral stuff that doesn't really matter. And then when you need to, you stop and you take a pause, and then you emphasize the important bit of data that you need to. So that's a simple those little techniques, and
Yeah,
there's a
and,
lot
and
of
the,
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
I just gonna say in the pause, again, we can think of people that do that really well,
Mm,
because it does. What am I trying to say? Like raise the awareness, I guess. When you pause, you go, "What's he going to say next?" Or what is she going to do next? And so that pause is very important, and sometimes we'll
yep.
highlight the point. And sometimes, people pause too long. It's kind of like, oh my
Yep.
gosh, they forget what they're going to say, or well, then you start
Yeah.
getting anxious for them.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, no, I do. So I often say there's some research somewhere that I think it's 5 point something seconds, 5.6 seconds, where you can stop talking, and then at that point, people might think that you're having a cardiac arrest. That's
Yeah,
that's the that's the sort of the threshold of that. Yeah. So about 5 seconds, which is a long time. And actually,
yeah,
what I find is that most people, especially these days, and I work with everybody's younger. I mean, I'm 53, so everybody's younger to me these days.
yeah,
But I work with a lot of millennials, I presume, and the speech is very very quick, very fast, and people are scared of silence. I use the analogy all the time with music. Silence is absolutely critical for the music to work effectively, and the same goes with the speech, and the same goes with communication. Without silence, there is no variety. It's just one level, or one journey, if you like, within that speech. So
yeah,
creating that space, what I think what is there's lots of anxiety around that. A lot of people think, right, if I'm going to stop speaking, someone's going to interrupt, or I'm going
yeah,
to forget what I'm going to say, or I'm not going to get my point across, or I haven't got time, so I need to speed up. Everything's got to be quick, 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 especially in meetings, etc. So what I help people do is use their breath to create a pause in certain parts of that speech, or the pitch, or the presentation, and each part of that has a different effect on the listener or the audience. And so, as you said, the creating that space, creating that pause allows you to think about what you're going to say next, to process that, for the audience to process that information as well. So it's and also to show your credibility. The longer you can pause before you speak, or during your dialogue, if you like, or monologue, the more credibility and the more authority you will show.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You'll appreciate this as a musician. I play dabble playing the guitar a little bit, and
Mm,
and I was working with an instructor once, and he said something that I thought was very profound, and I relate it to what you just said about speech.
mm.
He said, the difference between a good guitarist and a great guitarist is the great guitarist knows when not to play a note.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a very very highly revered skill, actually, to be able to play. When I was learning the saxophone, I did a lot of what we call pub gigs over here. Bars, I suppose, in the States. So, um, and a very very good mentor of mine, a guitarist, said to me, "Jimmy, listen, I need to tell you something. You're not getting paid by the semiquaver. Okay, just just to let you know."
yeah.
Because we're all trying to fit in as many notes as you can, and I think that's has a big connection with speech as well.
Yeah, and in music and in speech, presentation speeches, whatever, you talk about, the timing of rhythm and, the dynamic control that you have in that speech. And so,
Yep.
there's a certain cadence and a certain rhythm and whatever that
Yeah.
people like to hear. Just
Hmm.
like music, you're kind of anticipating what's coming next, and so
Hmm.
and I think again that's not something that not everyone has naturally, I wouldn't think,
Mm.
and sometimes you need to really think about it and work on recognizing that and training that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because I'm always talking about. Well, okay, so where do I go here? I think the main thing that's lacking is a connection to the intention of the words, and that's something that I see a lot of, particularly in the type of clients that I predominantly work on with, which are IT software engineers. That type of person that has, as you said, they've perhaps got some seed funding, or they've suddenly got a small team that they're working with, and they're not used to. They're normally working maybe by themselves, and so all of a sudden they've got a small team, or they've got to communicate, or they've got to pitch ideas, or etc. etc. So they're
Mhm.
not used to speaking. They're not used to relaying the data and the information in a cohesive way and an effective way. And what's lacking is the connection between their cognitive mind and the intention of the words. And
Yeah,
that's something that, so really, that's, and the ideal situation behind that is that we want to be completely oblivious of our voice. We don't want to be thinking about how we sound to others and how we sound to ourselves. We want to be focusing on purely the message and the intention of the words and the ideas that we're trying to relay. So that takes a bit of time for that muscle memory to become habitual when we're doing the exercises. But the three key areas that I help people with are pitch, dynamics, and tone. So those three key areas within the voice. So that I also, again, happy to talk about it. I also help with mindfulness and present moment exercises through acceptance and commitment therapy, and as well as the voice, and as well as coaching, leadership coaching as well.
yeah,
But the voice is my sort of, predominantly what I work on, really. And you'll find that most people in IT, people that are not aware or don't see the importance and the effectiveness of verbal communication, they are unfortunately quite monologue and quite monotone in their communication. So it's
yeah.
on one pitch, it's on one volume. So they're not varying the tone, they're not varying the volume or the pitch. So we work on those three key areas. And actually, variety is, and this is a bit of a cliche, but variety is the key to communication, in my opinion. And based on the connection emotionally of the intention of the words.
Right. And by using what you just said in those three areas, what you're trying to do is hold the attention of the people you're talking to, right? You're trying to, get them to be able to digest the words you're using. Because if you just, if otherwise, well, why not just give them a piece of paper and let them read it, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's a skill to presenting it in a way that not only gets the information to the person, but also inspires and motivates them to what you're saying.
Totally. What we try to do as musicians, and in particular, I suppose, as jazz musicians, is to get into the zone or the flow. And when we're in that flow, it's absolutely directly connected to the audience in an emotional way. So that's what we're looking for, and that has to become natural. So with jazz, with improvisation, etc., that needs to be practiced. So if I can use that analogy or metaphor of jazz and improvisation, a lot of people think perhaps that, I mean, I used to get a lot of people coming up to me at the end of the gig and saying, how do you do what you do? How do you scat sing? How do you play the saxophone? How do you know what to play? You just kind of play random notes. What are you doing? But actually it's, and this as a guitarist, it's not random. Some of it sometimes it is, but most of the time there's a structure. Most of the time, there's a harmonic structure, there's a melodic structure, and there's a style, and there's a certain expectation of what phrasing you to play, and there's a language. I think actually language is the key thing here. So, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort and routine and practice to establish and to digest that language as a jazz musician. And exactly the same as a communicator, an orator, if you like, as well. It's very rare that someone is perhaps Obama. I doubt it. I'm sure he did lots of debating at college, you know. But you know, it's very rare that you have a very eloquent orator. And in fact, I'm a terrible speaker. I really am. I'm umming and ahhing all the time because I'm find it very difficult to control my emotions. I'm very good at teaching and coaching people how to do it, but as a speaker, I'm a very good singer. But as a speaker, I find it a big challenge to really be concise with my ideas. I'm sort of improvising here and playing around a bit, but it's I'm very aware how difficult it is to be very concise with your ideas without being affected by how you feel at the time.
Yeah.
And that can
And
be
I
sorry,
would
go ahead.
assume too that whether it's performing as a musician or in a presentation at a company, you also have to be aware of your audience. And even though you have this great strategy and you've practiced a certain way,
Mm,
if you're aware that you're not connecting somehow, you may have to change, in mid-performance, so to
mm.
speak, and bring something else out or do something a little different to engage that audience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great thought. Yeah, so something that I work on with clients as well is impromptu speaking and improvising. So it's really kind of getting out of your head. I think that's a key thing because there's all sorts of distractions. As you mentioned, you know, there's all sorts of things that could go wrong or something that's going to distract you. Somebody walking in late into a meeting or a conference, you know, it's going to distract you. So having having a canon or an armory of things that you can do in the moment and practicing that, you know, whether it be a Q&A or whether it be that you can go off tack slightly and talk about something else or change the objective or change the order of things in the conference. Do you know, not sticking to the script. I think that's the key, also the key thing, and having some boundaries there and having some guidelines, but not feeling obliged to stick to the script and be able to communicate the message in a variety of ways. The more you can practice something, again, analogy of music, if you have a simple phrase, the more you can do it. Can you do it blindfolded? Can you do it while you're frying an egg? Can you do it in the left hand? Can you do it while you're talking? Can you play sta da do 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 dio? Can you do that as you're, you know, jumping up and down? You know, that sort of practice
Yeah.
and impromptu speaking exercises, you know, taking loads of sort of dialogue exercises, taking the last three words that somebody else has said and then developing that as an idea, as a motif, that type of thing. Again, another analogy with music, but there's lots of things that you can practice to mainly get out of your head, and that's what we're trying to do. I suppose that's sort of segueing, if you like. Sorry about the pun. Into what I do with acceptance and commitment therapy, which is, you know, not to be distracted and to be diffused from negative thoughts, which is really key.
Yeah, so I guess let's dive into that because that's kind
Mm,
of was my next question too.
sure.
How do you get rid of worrying about the judgment that you're speaking in front of this group and and you're nervous or you're thinking, gosh, are they judging me? Yeah, that's that anxiety feeling. So
Mm,
uh, tell us about how you deal with that through this commitment therapy that you're talking about. How would you do this?
sure. Okay. Well, the first thing we do is establish what our values are. So we go through a set of sort of questionnaire, and we talk or we discuss what's important to us in business, in life, and it might be could be anything. Most of the time, the answer will be, so the first question is who or what is important to you in life. So there's establishing that, because what we need to do, there's three or four questions on this, and they get sort of deeper and deeper and deeper, and discussing what might be unbalanced in that connection to what's important to you. So establishing, for instance, that my family or time with my family, for instance, is important. So that might mean that actually I'm working 100-hour week. You know, I'm doing just ridiculous amount of hours. I'm not spending time with the kids. I'm not spending time with the wife, and it's making me irritable. It's making my wife irritable, the kids irritable, and it's making me irritable at work. So what do we need to do with this? Well, if, for instance, I focused a bit more time on spending time with the kids, I might be a little bit less tired. And if I'm less tired, I might be less anxious. I might not avoid an opportunity to put my hand up at a meeting. I might, when I do put my hand up at the meeting, I might answer with humility. I might answer with the reason that I'm giving that answer is because I want to spend more time with my family, and therefore I'm going to give an answer which is going to navigate or rocket me into maybe some sort of promotion after a certain amount of time. So by stopping avoiding certain situations and committing action towards your values is the first thing that we do. The second thing that we do is practice present moment exercises. So that's the key thing with acceptance commitment therapy is being aware of either physical or cognitive thoughts or feelings that you might be experiencing at the time, but be willing to move regardless of those. So still speak. So going back to, if you don't mind me quoting the beginning of this interview, if you like,
Sure.
if you like,
Go ahead.
you mentioned there's a couple of times that you, if you like, avoided that promotion or that situation that you were in,
Right.
and thankfully you decided. I'd like to ask you actually, if you don't mind. I know it's a bit personal. Please don't answer unless you feel comfortable. But
Fine.
what was the catalyst behind you deciding to actually take the stage?
Well, I think it was support from friends and family that said, you're great at this. Why would you not do this?
Yeah,
Giving me confidence, pumping me up, that type of thing. And probably just a little more time of experience of doing it in smaller groups and smaller venues and saying, maybe I can do this. So probably just it was probably just a mindset shift, you know?
yeah, absolutely. So you couldn't have answered that in a more textbook way, actually. I appreciate that. It's like as if we rehearsed beforehand.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So great. So you were desensitized to the environment because you perhaps did some speaking in smaller venues or different environments acoustically or whatever it might be, or smaller audiences. So you were getting yourself used to physically and mentally to that bigger, larger stage. Your family were were boosting you up, were if you like, not, generally massaging your ego and saying, look, you have these skills, you're capable of doing, you have the experience, what's going on, which is then helping you question, actually, yeah, actually I do have this, I can do it. There's no reason for me not to be doing this. So that's fantastic that you ended up doing, and you're still here, you're still alive to tell the tale.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. And then as you alluded to, you do it and you get rewarded for it, and
yeah,
then you start to build the confidence, right? You start to realize, hey, I can do
yeah.
this.
One of the yeah, absolutely. One of the, you mentioned the word reward. One of the questions that I ask as well is, if you were to do something that you weren't rewarded or judged for, what would it be? Because I think I'm going back to, maybe a lack of time with family or friends or so on and so forth. What I find with most of my clients or the people I meet is that they are workaholics. They are either perfectionists or workaholics or
Mhm.
both, and they are just purely working, and the stress that they are going there that they are under is monumental.
Mhm.
So if they could do something, for instance, I had a couple of years ago, I had a client that wanted to do. I thought it was hilarious actually because he was very nervous. I mean, very, very conscious. And we talked about even just going out to the restaurant with him and his a girlfriend at the time. He was very conscious of everybody's hearing his conversation around him in the restaurant. Which
Wow.
is, I think it's quite common actually that we're very, particularly in the UK, I think, very self-deprecating and very aware, over aware perhaps. He is English. Um, but and he said to me, I said, what, if you could do something where you weren't rewarded for it, as in salary, or
Yeah.
bonuses, or you weren't judged, as in peers or colleagues, what would you do? He said, I tell you what, I'd really like to do, and I'd like to do stand up. Okay, you know, and he, so, and to give him credit, he did a stand up course,
Yeah.
at the end. And he sent me a video of him doing it. It was just brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic that he
Yeah.
did that, you know. And he feels even more shy now. He won't do anything at all.
That's funny. No, I think that, I don't care who you are. I think there's very few people in this world that don't care what how they come across or what other people think or
Mm,
whatever. So, when you talk about rewards, it's kind of like if you do something and people come out and say, "Oh my gosh, that was so great," and so I really got a lot out of this, and whatever that gives you the confidence, and if you don't get any feedback, sometimes you go to the negative, like, okay, no one said anything, so I must have
mm.
sucked,
Yeah.
type of. And that may not be true. It may just not be
Mm,
that there was an opportunity for you to get that feedback. But I think it's really interesting. Another personal, since we're going personal here, I'll give you another example.
mm,
So, when I speak in front of a group, whether it's 10 or 20 people or whether it's 1,500 people, um, I can look out and see people in the audience and look them right in the eye and talk to them, and I can do that.
mm,
Now, I'm not a professional musician by any means, but as you say, I play the guitar, and for friends and family, I will sing.
mm,
To this day, I cannot sing and look at somebody in the eye.
mm,
I'm just always looking somewhere else or whatever.
mm.
And I think I'm aware of it,
Oh,
but it's
can we work on this? Let's work on this.
because I don't know why, but I can't,
I think I can tell. I think because I'm really fascinated with this, right? Can
okay.
I tell you what I think it might be?
I'd love to hear it. Yes.
Okay. What my immediate reaction? I'd love the listeners to chime in. I don't know, in the comments or however it might work. I don't know. Um, but I think that people are generally quite self-conscious about being an audience. Right? I
Yeah.
think they're very self-conscious and feel awkward about. And don't take this the wrong way. It could be
Okay.
anybody, unless it was maybe
Sure.
Van Morrison or John Martin, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
right, depends on your take. Your start, your taste, obviously, but if you're an audience member, it's even more awkward. And I wonder, because I get the impression that you're very humble and I just my impression. I've only met you for 15 minutes. I don't know how long we've been speaking,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
imagine that you're very self-conscious of not making people feel awkward, and there is a natural feeling as an audience member that you might, if you're in close proximity, where do you look? Where does everybody look at this point? Do you just stare at the musician like this? You can't see me, obviously, but that's my diagnosis anyway. I don't know what you think about that.
So what you're saying is it's more that I don't want them to feel awkward
Yeah,
as opposed to me feeling awkward.
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's really interesting. I had
yeah,
not thought of that. So here,
yeah.
man,
Just an
I'm getting
idea.
some free therapy here. This is awesome. No,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting because I know that
Mm,
I've heard, like people that are helping performers be better performers. One of the things they will tell you often is, you need to connect with the audience. So pick
mm.
somebody out and
Yeah.
sing like you're singing to them personally or whatever. And it helps get your message and helps you get the emotion out and whatever. But it is a good point because yeah, I've been in audiences too, where if someone's looking right at you, you're thinking, "Oh God, what are they looking at? What's going on?"
I've been fascinated with this for a very, very long time, and I had an interview. I did a similar podcast on my podcast a long time ago now, um, with a chap who's quite well known, and I'm terrible with names, John. I'm only kidding, Steve. Right?
Okay, got it.
And he's quite well known on television in the UK. And he's an old friend of mine, although I can't be that old friend because I can't remember his name. It will come to me, but so we were talking about. Okay, so we related in the idea of when we're performing on stage, there's normally somebody at the front of if it, of the audience. Now we're talking a cabaret or a jazz stage here, or
Yeah,
right. So it's not theatre. So theatre, you've got the fourth wall, you've got the spotlight. You cannot see the audience, or
yeah,
very, very, as you know, very rarely can you see the audience. So it's very difficult to connect. So the only way to connect is to break that fourth wall and be in character, right? So that's the theatre side of things. When you're in a cabaret situation, let's do it with speaking. If you're in a conference, you can see the people generally. It's normally in the day, and you can normally see the people. So you do want to connect with them, and there's lots of ways that you can do that, in present, with presence and alignment and body language and eye contact and facial expressions and etc. So very difficult virtually, actually. As I speak to you, I'm sort of trying to look, as you know, virtually. This is a big challenge for everyone at the moment. I'm looking at you, but I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at the screen. But if I look at the camera, you can see me, but you're thinking, well, he's false because etc. Right? So there's that. But there's sort of the stereotype of somebody right at the front of the audience. They're sat there with their arms folded. Now in the UK, there's a bit of a stereotype of a northern person. Go on then, entertain me. This sort of, it could be a middle-aged man from Yorkshire, that has seen everything, and so I always look at, I'm very conscious as a performer. We're all very fragile, so you're constantly looking out for these people that are judging you, and you want to. And he said something very interesting. So I said to him, you want to please them. You want to make, if you can get them to stand up and clap at the end, you've done it. You've had a great gig. You've achieved something. He said, no, 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 no. I don't. I ignore them. I ignore them. I'm not bothered about them. If they're not interested in what I do, what I've got to say, I'm not interested. They can leave. They can go. Most of the time, most of the time they've come in for a warm.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah,
they've
yeah.
come in to warm up anyway. And
Uh-huh.
if they're not interested in what I'm doing, whether the front or not, I focus on the people that have paid money and they're interested and they're willing to be involved and connect with me. That's who I'm connecting with. And as soon as you think like that, that's a slight change in mindset.
Yeah,
It's much easier to perform in that way when you're not bothered about the people that are judging you, the inner critic on the shoulder, if you like. If you're not
yeah,
bothered about them, because based on in my opinion and my training, based on your values, if you're not worried about their their judgment, then it doesn't matter. All that matters is your either your voice or your words at that moment.
yeah. I saw on your YouTube channel, you talk a little bit about, let's say that I'm going to give a presentation to a group or give a speech or whatever, and you give some recommendations for like going to the room ahead of time and
Mm.
visualize and whatever. So tell us a little bit about, if I'm going to talk to this
Yeah.
group and I want to give a speech, I want to come across good as a speaker. What should I do to help me feel better about connecting with that crowd?
Well, okay. So this is really this is my embellishment of somebody, a lady called Patsy Rodenberg, who wrote an amazing book called Presence, and she is or was the head of the head of Royal School of Speech and Drama for 20 odd years. So if anybody knows about connection with the audience, she does. And now she's written quite a few books, but this is her sort of excuse me, her her sort of main book really called Presence. So she talks about breathing into the room, and it sounds a little bit hippy dippy, but it's an incredibly effective way. So firstly, what I always try to do is get to if I'm either speaking or performing, I get to the venue early so I can get used to the feeling of the room. Especially if it's a large conference room, I get there. There's normally the maitre d'. There's waiters, waitresses, doing their thing. They're laying the tables, putting the glasses out. They're putting numbers in the middle of the table. There's all that stuff. Everybody's shining glasses, etc. There's an AV team, so that's also important to get familiar with whoever's working on the audio visual side. So I'll go to the back of the room where there's generally 3 or 4 tables and the AV guys are set up, and I'll introduce myself and say, "Hi, Jim. I'm Jimmy. How you doing? I'm performing this evening, speaking this evening. How's it going? What time did you get here? Oh God, 6, crikey, right. That's just making conversation, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully they're thinking, oh, he's okay, he's a nice guy, or hopefully, or he's not a complete idiot. So you're having that relationship, you're building that relationship a little bit. I have a chat with somebody, I get used to the room. I might walk on stage if I can. If not in the way, I'll just walk around the stage. There's one really great exercise that you can do. I'm not going to ask you to do it unless you want to, but you can blow into the corners of the room, Okay, so you literally, I'll do your. This is just audio. Is that right, Stephen? This is not. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just yeah. So I got to be
Audio and
careful.
video. No, we're video as well.
Oh, with videos. Oh, I would have done my hair
Oh yeah.
if you could have warned me. I would have got makeup on as well, you know. So okay, well I'll just do it quickly then. It's okay. So I'm going to blow into the corners of the room, and generally, depending on the size of the room, there's 8 corners, right? So as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we're going to blow. Now speed up a little bit, and imagine that I've blown into that space. Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you're putting your presence, literally your energy. You've got to be careful because you're going to feel and look a bit weird walking
Yeah.
around, blowing into the room. They might ask you to leave, you know. So you need to do it subtly, but just blowing air into the space that you're in, or walking around the space and breathing into the space is a really, really effective thing. It gives you power. It gives you power over the space, over the acoustic energy of the room. So when you do go on stage, it's not so alien anymore. You've transversed it already. It's something that is internalized.
Yeah, that's great. So do you think, we can probably agree that everyone can improve and get better, and at their speaking and so on. Do you
Mm.
think you can take someone who starts out as a poor speaker and make them into a really good speaker? Is that something
Yeah,
that you
absolutely,
do?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. We all have the physiological ability to be able to speak with more presence, more projection, more dynamics, etc. And the only thing that might stop you, well, there's 2 things that will stop you, which is what I help people. I don't help people with the clinical side of things. So if there's, if you have a voice dysphonia, nodules or polyps or something like that, then you do need to go and get referred to an ENT, and just to make sure there's nothing serious going on. I would put that as a caveat. But generally speaking, if you've excuse me, if you've got a weak or monotone voice, it's really about projection. This is
Yeah.
really interesting. I find this interesting. I talk about this all day. So projection is not necessarily volume. It's about resonance. So creating a different balance of resonance to project in certain acoustic situations. So if I give you an example, there's if I do the resonance ladder, for instance, okay. So the ladder being this was given to me. I'm just gonna have some water. I'm so sorry. This is the
No.
ironically, yeah, long day, dry air in my office. Hang on. It's actually very hot in the UK, which is very rare. So
Yeah.
I've got because we're doing the podcast, I've got the windows. We don't have aircon in the UK, So when it's hot, like a dry air. Okay, so I was demonstrating this to a friend of mine, Nicole, who is a speech pathologist. She works in a hospital, and she said, "Oh, I call this the resonance ladder." Okay, so basically you'll start in the chest. So we're gonna if I get a little bit closer to the microphone, so I'm gonna speak very much like I call this my vicar voice, and it's very much of do come in, welcome, and if you do want to make a contribution to the roof, we would be delighted to accept that, right? So that's the chest voice. If a lot of people speak in the throat, if they're speaking that kind of sound, kind of slightly witchy. If they've been speaking, I'm going to go kind of Brooklyn, right? I don't know why, but there's that harsh kind of sound. If they're speaking a long time like that, it's going to give a lot of vocal load over the vocal folds. Is going to be, forgive me if I'm distorting, but it's, if a lot of people just speak from the throat, and we phonate from the throat, but the resonance can be held there, right? You can just keep the sound in there. Some people speak more forward, so they bring sound. There's quite a few Shakespearean actors that use this method to bring the sound more forward. It's called forward placement, and they bring it in more into the oral cavity. So if you're doing a voiceover, that's the sort of thing that you might do, is this sort of thing. So if I'm doing a voiceover, I might think, if I'm doing a very particular English voiceover, I might think about my articulation and my vowels and bringing the sound more forward. If I want to get more projection, like really projection, if I want to speak to the end of the room, I'll use more nasality in my voice. So I'm going to go a little bit more here, and I'm going to project. Could everybody come to the back of the room, please? Start there. right? So a little bit, excuse me, shouting, right? And then we go to the top of the ladder. There's the head voice, which is that sort of area there, and we can speak there, and we can go down all the way down into the her chest voice in that sort of area if we want to. All right.
Yeah.
So it's the ideal situation is to create what's called a balanced phonation, which is what Ingo Tietz derived is a balance of phonation, which is the balance of breath and tone. So
Yeah.
that finding that balance, and what most people are not doing is using their vocal range, and they're
Yeah.
not using their abdominal muscles to control that breath, and that's what I help people do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you said that you played with Tom Jones, and anybody I can think of, when he goes, oh, he just changes. When he starts singing, he
Yeah,
just it's different than when he's speaking. So
yeah,
he really gets down into that lower register and
yeah,
and projects strongly. So and
yeah.
every singer has their own style, but I think
Mm,
that's fascinating. So what you're
mm,
saying, I think, if I'm listening correctly
mm.
is going in between the different things to give variety and emphasis and
Yeah,
whatever is really the key to great speaking.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
great. And you also were talking about the throat and whatever. There's like,
Mm,
I think you said there's 70 muscles around the larynx,
mm.
and knowing how to control them and work with them and whatever, and practice with them, is key.
Yeah, and I really great. I'll give you a couple of tips actually, which is to manipulate the muscles in the larynx. And so if you're an impressionist, that's what you do. If you and I'm terrible at impressions. I can do a couple. I'm not going to do them, but and I sort of did them there. I manipulated slightly, but it's mainly about finding that different areas of resonance that I just did there with a resonance ladder. But you can manipulate the muscles in the larynx to make a different sound, right, of the voice. And it might be like this, could be that, right? It could be different sounds. And that's what impressionists do. So mimicking people that you like. So I have a lot of clients and they say, oh, I really like this voice. I had a client, which is kind of a bit of a challenge for me personally with my political champagne socialist views, which they really like well, what's his name now? I'm complete. Here we are. I'm terrible with names. What's the very? I'm going to put you on the spot now. What's the? He's been indicted. He's an English guy, lives in America. They're brothers. He's been indicted. He's very right wing, very masculine. Anyway, that guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying. I can't think of his name, but anyway, he likes him, so that's great. Fantastic. So he likes the sound of his voice. So what I did, in fact, I've got a video on this chap on my YouTube channel. I think this is probably the latest one I've done. So I've just analyzed how he uses his voice or how he communicates. So if you like a particular voice, then mimic that voice, and you can do that by listening and listening and listening. And one other tip, if we've got time, I'm sorry
Sure.
to, I
That's
don't mean
fine. Go
to
ahead.
take
Go
over,
for it. Yeah.
is to when you're reading a bedtime story, you're generally quite animated when you do that because it's for kids and it's for children. You want to relay the character, and it might be so little Jessica was walking in the rain to see her friend, right? It might be something like that, right? Sounds a bit strange. Then I'm not going to carry on down that line, but right. So how you do that, how you use your voice in that way. Everybody can do that. I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to put you on the spot unless you want to, but anybody can do that. Make that more of an animated sound to the voice. So basically, we're just extreme. We're creating more extreme, you know, contrast of tone and dynamics and character. We're putting character into the voice. So if you, as an example, if you're, I also work with quite a lot of academics as well. So they're pitching for PhD funding or whatever they might be doing, and their subject is boring, right? They find it boring. I mean, we find it boring, they find it boring. So invariably, the panel are going to find it boring as well, and they're not going to be listening. And they're actually looking for people that have a little bit of character and a bit of energy because they want people to use the money effectively. So actually by animating something else, by talking about something else. So I had a client recently who, so I keep going about clients, this is all I do. So I had somebody not yesterday, last week. I said, look, what are you passionate about? She said, I'm passionate about making salad, right? So whenever I go home, I love making my famous salad. Okay, great. So send me a video, telling me how you do the salad, and So she actually sent me. She got everything out on the kitchen. She videoed herself just on the smartphone, and she did the salad for me. She said, "Okay, well, I got some toasted almonds, and I'm going to blah blah blah." And she did, got really excited about, really passionate. So I said, "Great. Can you take that energy and put it into your pitch?" So that's what she did. It was
Yeah.
10 times better.
Yeah.
So it's not always about the content, it's about how you deliver the content.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jimmy, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything I haven't asked you or anything that we haven't covered that you want to be sure and get in the program?
No, not at all. No, I really enjoy the conversation. I'm so sorry if I've been speaking for England here, but
That's
I
great.
suddenly I get passionate about it as well. Yeah.
Don't worry. Well, at this time of the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom you could leave us with today?
Pause.
Yeah, that's that's well said. So
Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot here.
Okay.
So sign us off today and give us a a taste of jazz vocal as we say our goodbyes
Oh,
here.
okay. All right. Fine. It's not the pale moon that excites me, that thrills and delights me. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. How's that?
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. Well, Jimmy,
Pleasure.
this has been a real pleasure. As I said, I'm intrigued with the topic, and I think there's so much we can learn from this, and I think it's something that leaders definitely need to pay attention to. And so, if someone wants to improve their speaking skills and work on these kind of things, find a good speech coach. But if they want to find you, how do they do that?
Very simple, Steve. JimmyCannon.com.
Okay, great. Well, Jimmy, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun talking with you, and have a good rest of your day. What's left of it? You're in England, so your day's about over, and mine's just beginning. So it's been good to talk to you, and I appreciate your time. So thanks for being on the show.
Likewise, Steve. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, take care. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.